For all of us, relationships are the most valuable things we have. We often wonder if those relationships will continue in heaven. What happens to a baby who dies at birth? What about aborted babies? Today, a look at how God will make all things right in our future heavenly home. For a message of comfort, stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Our current Running to Win series is all about what happens 1 minute after you die. In his fourth message, Dr. Lutzer is speaking on Welcome, You Have Arrived, and today he's dealing with relationships, including our children.
Certainly, God will recreate them. They will have eternal bodies. There will be no limitation in heaven. We need not worry about that. Many women who have had abortions struggle with the question of how they will be reconciled to the little ones whom they aborted. God will make sure that reconciliation takes place so that throughout all of eternity, the matters that concerned us here on earth will be taken care of. And a child will be complete, will participate in the full blessings of all that God has prepared for them that love Him. And sometimes, those of you who have lost a little one, you say, well, why does God take a little child? And I've explained before how that when a shepherd wants to take the sheep to a part of the mountain, perhaps up a high precipice, where the sheep do not want to go, he will simply reach into the flock and take a little lamb, one on one arm and another one on the other, and then he will begin to walk. And as he does, the two mothers begin to follow the little lamb, and after they begin to walk along, the others reluctantly begin to follow too. And sometimes what God does is, He gives us little ones, and then He reminds us through their death of the fact that heaven is so real, and it is the place where all of us are going. And the affection that we have for this world is lessened as we anticipate meeting on the other side. Remember that story of the man whose little one was buried in a cemetery, and only he and the minister went to the little grave. And it was a rainy, dismal day. And as the man was weeping over his little daughter who had died and whom they now tenderly laid away, he then took the key of the casket and gave it to the keeper of the cemetery. And the minister said, you think that you've given the key of this casket to the keeper of the cemetery, but really that key is on the girdle of the Son of God, the one who has the keys of death and of Hades. And someday He will come, and that casket will open, and your little girl will be raised. Folks, that is the teaching of the Scriptures, and that is our hope. Some things stay the same. The knowledge that we have, the love that we have, the interaction that we remember here on earth. Some things are different. Certainly our bodies are going to be radically different. But in the end, we shall be with Christ and be like Him. Let me make some very important conclusions. Number one, death, when you stop to think of it, is really not the enemy. It appears to be on this side of the curtain. This side of the curtain, mystery, yes. Fearful, yes. Entering, as the song says, that vast unknown. And you remember Hamlet wrestled with the possibility of suicide. And then he concluded that in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil. And what he's saying is, we'd like to commit suicide, but the problem is we don't know what lies on the other side. It could be worse than what we're experiencing here. What lies on the other side? For the believer, Fearsome though death is, the fact that it is still our enemy, it ruptures relationships, it brings tears, it brings loneliness, it brings heartache. That's on this side of the curtain. On the other side of the curtain, happiness, bliss, being with Christ, being with Him forever. And by the way, those who do wish to commit suicide, always remember that what you encounter over there may indeed be far worse than it is here. Certainly there are believers who have done that, and they have, I believe, gone to glory. But it is a fearful thing to show up in heaven at your decision rather than the decision of Christ. Death for the believer, though, is indeed not a fearful event. We will all fear it, absolutely, because on this side, terror at times, but on the other side, bliss and joy. And, of course, as we've emphasized, it is the means that God uses to take us to heaven. You see, the Scripture says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. In other words, the way you are now, you can't go to heaven. Could you imagine being in a place that is eternal and having a corruptible body? And so you go to heaven as you are? That would be a really terrible, terrible experience. Here we are, we're in this wonderful eternal place, and here our bodies are aching and filled with pain and weakness. Impossible. So the way in which we inherit the kingdom is God comes for us, and the promise is a new resurrection, a body that fits in with the eternality of our heavenly home. Death, if we see it properly, is a friend on the other side of the curtain. Second, death is a bend in the road, but it is not the end of the road. It's just a bend in the road. Your consciousness continues from this part of life to the other. If you are conscious, of course, many people may not be on this side, but if you die in an accident, let us suppose you die very, very quickly, the consciousness just continues. There's a continual stream, and suddenly you are there. You're the same person, but you meet Christ and the angels, as we have explained. Do you remember that story of Dr. Sandhorn, a minister in Iowa? He went to visit this little girl who was dying one Saturday morning, and the little girl was there in the bed mumbling. And she said, as soon as they opened